Well, welcome everyone to this second Florida Citizens Alliance Congressional District 19 Primary Candidate Forum. We're really pleased to have you join us tonight. I'm Rick Stevens. I'm the pastor at Diplomat Church in Cape Coral and one of the managing directors of the Florida Citizens Alliance. The Florida Citizens Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We're really an alliance of like-minded people. We primarily work for K through 12 education solutions in Florida. And as part of that, we try to model some of the solutions we have in mind. And that's why we do candidate forums, because part of what our students need to learn is how to be good citizens. And so we need to be good citizens as examples of that. And so getting acquainted with the candidates that are running to represent us is an important part of that. And so we're really pleased to be a part of that process and help everyone be informed and to vote with careful and complete knowledge of what's going on. We have invited all of the qualified candidates of all parties to join us tonight, and we appreciate many of them joining us. And we're going to get right to the forum, so you'll have every opportunity to hear what's going on. We'll begin with candidate introductions, and each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves. We will use a timer to help everybody keep on track, and we had very good participation and response to that type of approach last time, and we appreciate the candidates and their cooperation with that. Earlier this afternoon, I did what I did last time. I drew names for who could go first, and so we'll just follow that order. And so I want to welcome David Holden to our forum tonight. David, you get to go first.
After I unmute, thank you so much. It's so good to be here. It's wonderful to have an opportunity to exchange views with a number of the candidates. My name is David Holden, a Democrat running again for the seat. I was the Democratic nominee in 2018. We face a series of critical problems in our community and in our nation. First and foremost, the pandemic and the associated economic collapse that we're seeing. I think that we have done a poor job in responding to that. We have 4% of the population and 25% of the deaths worldwide, and that's simply not good enough. We're closing in on 100,000 dead Americans in the face of this pandemic. We have an opportunity here to build a new American dream together, build a new country that is fair for working people, a living wage, paid sick leave, and universal access to quality health care. That's what I'm offering the people of Southwest Florida, and that's what I hope we get a chance to talk about through this forum and forums to come. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next up is Kristin Mclaughlin. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you so much, Pastor. My name is Kristin Mclaughlin. I'm a proud Republican, pro-Trump, pro-life, and pro-Constitution woman. I am young, Latina, and I'm proudly representing the people of Southwest Florida. I'm born and raised here and a lifelong resident. What an opportunity this is today. Despite the fact that we are facing a pandemic, this is an opportunity to see that the United States is so resilient and that we have the strength and endurance to overcome and come back stronger than ever. Now we have an open seat here in Southwest Florida, and this is our opportunity to work on expanding the Republican Party and ensuring that we have a prosperous future in which our representatives focus on the interests of Southwest Florida instead of using political clout to line their pockets. This is the seat of the people. It is a collaborative effort. I, am a lawyer, a certified teacher, and I have worked for the Republican Party for the last 5 years, and I volunteered for Trump since 2015. I'm so proud and humbled to be running for Southwest Florida, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Kristin. Glad to have you here. Next up is Cindy Battye. Cindy, welcome to the forum.
Hi, thank you so much for hosting this as a great event, and really appreciate your facilitation. So I'm Dr. Cindy Battye. I'm a candidate for Congress here in Southwest Florida Congressional District 19. I'm a mom and small business owner, and I'm fighting for our water, our health, and our community. I've been compelled to run for this seat after years and years of working with nonprofits across the region, hundreds of nonprofits, interacting with thousands of people across our region, trying to build data-based decision-making and policy across the region. Without fail, I would write reports, bring it to leaders to let them know not only what the people think, but about issues in our community. They would pat me on the head and send me along on their way and still do nothing about the issues that affect the people in this community most. So I realized that if I really wanted things to change in my community, if I really wanted the things that the people in this region want and need to get done, they needed a servant leader, not somebody who's got corporate interests, not somebody who's out for their own political gain, but a true servant leader. So I decided to run for the seat to be the servant leader that the people of Southwest Florida deserve.
Thank you, Cindy. Glad to have you here. We appreciate you being a part of our forum tonight. Next up is Dan Severson. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Pastor Rick. Thanks for this opportunity. And I'm Dan Severson, former Navy Top Gun fighter pilot, veteran legislator, and hopefully a Christ-centered family man. I served my country for 22 years as a naval officer from the Far East to Washington, D.C. As a fighter pilot, I flew both day and night in all kinds of weather, from calm seas off of Australia to the edge of a typhoon off the Philippines. Protecting you and the constitutional liberties I swore to uphold. After retiring at the rank of commander, I worked in a high-tech startup business and then was recruited for the legislature, and I served 4 years in the majority and then another 4 in the minority, 2 of those as the minority whip, where we were able to hold back $3.2 billion in tax increases. As a Floridian now of 27 years, I'm ready to serve you again. I'm the only tested and proven leader in military, business, legislative, and divided government sectors. I'm the only one with the experience to hit the ground running and to be your representative for Southwest Florida and the wingman President Trump needs in the 117th Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Pleasure to have you join us. Next, let's meet Dane Eagle.
Thank you, Pastor Rick, everyone at Citizens Alliance, and our moderators for hosting this. And thank you for anyone who watches or would have been tuning in if we're able to live stream right now. And thank you to the candidates for participating. I know you've invited everybody and you see who's shown up, and I'm sure the voters will remember that when they watch this. But I appreciate the opportunity in times like this where we can't meet in person, and you, Citizens Alliance, providing a forum for us to get our message out so that the voters can choose wisely. My name is Dane Eagle. I'm the majority leader in the Florida House of Representatives, and I've served Southwest Florida for the past 8 years and risen to that leadership position by not wavering on any principles and fighting hard to make sure that we are ushering conservative legislation to Governor DeSantis' desk. I know that we need someone who can defend our Constitution, our country, and our president, who is going to also offer stability to CD19, consistent conservative measures for CD19, and I'm the candidate who can offer that. I'm asking for your vote. You can learn more at daneeagle.com. I look forward to this forum tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dane, and welcome. And finally, Byron Donald. Welcome, Byron. Glad to have you with us.
Pastor Rick, Keith, the Florida Citizens Alliance, thanks so much for having me. It's actually really good to have everybody come on and do these debates. They're very important. And, I know that we have people here who take this seriously, so I'm glad that there are many candidates here that decided to participate. My name is Byron Donald. I'm running for Congress simply because Southwest Florida is one of the most conservative areas in the country, and it deserves to have a true conservative represent them in Washington. I've lived here for 17 years. Outside of politics, I'm a business owner, I'm a husband, and I have 3 sons. I was elected to the Florida legislature in 2016. There are going to be a lot of choices in this election, but, knowing the voters how I know them, what the voters are really looking for is somebody who's going to uphold the Constitution, who's always going to protect constitutional rights, and is going to help to expand our party and take our message of individual liberty and limited government to all voters. But even today, we're in even more of a crisis. If you look at what Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats did over the weekend, passing a $3 trillion political bill, which is just wasteful and massive spending without even understanding what's actually been going on with the dollars Congress has already appropriated. You need a legislator in Washington who, number one, understands legislative process like I do, but at the same time understands the financial markets, financial systems, and also the bedrock of our Constitution, and will weigh all 3 to make sure that the best decisions are being made on behalf of the people of Southwest Florida. So my name is Byron Donald. I'm running for Congress. I'm running to support our Constitution, always upholding it, expanding our party, standing with our president, and making sure that we continue to make America the greatest nation man has ever known. Go to my website at byrondonalds.com, and I hope to have your vote.
Thank you, Byron, and welcome. Glad
it happens all the time. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
We have two moderators for our forum, and I want to go over just a little bit about how we conduct these forums. If you've watched our forums before or attended one in person, you know that we try to have, and almost always do have, two moderators. We ask the candidates to be straightforward with you and to be succinct in their answers, so we ask them to answer the questions in 1 minute. We allow rebuttals under certain circumstances, but only if the moderators believe it's appropriate, and we leave that at their discretion. And the moderators choose the order that the candidates will answer the questions in whatever way they wish. Now, it's very important for everybody to understand that the questions the moderators ask are their own. The Florida Citizens Alliance does not tell the moderators what they must ask, what they can ask, or what they cannot ask. We leave it up to them. If you submitted a question to the forum, the moderators have those questions and they will consider using them. We have talked to the moderators, and just as an attempt to focus our conversation, but not confine it to this, we asked them to consider questions related to immigration, education, and voter fraud and voter ID. That was just a suggestion. It's up to the moderators what they want to do with that. We just want you to be transparent up front in the beginning so that everybody knows what's going on. It's important to us that we have independent moderators. We expect them to be independent, and we respect their independence. We've also given the moderators blank copies of the two surveys that we asked the candidates to complete. There are constitutional survey is one of them, and one is an issues-based survey. The moderators have the questions but not the answers, and they can use those questions if they wish. At the end of our series of forums, we will publish a voter guide using the answers from the candidates' responses on that, but at this point, we're not prepared to release that. But if you want to look at the survey forms and make your own survey, you can find that on our website, and I'll talk about that at the end of the forum tonight, where you can find that. So let's introduce the moderators. We're really pleased to have Father Michael Orsi, who's the parochial vicar at St. Agnes Catholic Church in Naples. Father Orsi speaks wisely and well. Some people say these are morally cloudy times, but when you listen to Father Orsi speak, he can cut through all of that and bring a crisp clarity to those kinds of things. We appreciate that. And he has a pastor's heart, and that will come through as well. So welcome, Father Orsi. We're glad to have you here. Joining Father Orsi is Bob Mcclure. Bob is the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute. James Madison Institute is Florida's premier free market think tank. It was founded in 1987. It's one of the nation's oldest and largest 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan research and educational organizations. And you talk to Bob Mcclure very long, and you'll realize that this is a principled, focused group. They focus on principles on all of the issues across a wide spectrum of things that affect Floridians, and they bring their wisdom and expertise to that, and we really appreciate that. If you want to learn more about JMI, you can find them at jamesmadison.org. So welcome, Bob, and I understand you're going to begin our forum, so please take it away. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you, Pastor Rick, and thank you to all the candidates for your willingness to be here again this evening. I think this is, under the current circumstances, I think this is a terrific opportunity for not only for you to share your message, but also for the voters to learn more and more about you. Father Orsi and I drew straws, and he won, so I'm going to ask the first question, and then I've got kind of the order, much like Pastor Rick. I've kind of got you guys in random order, and I'll reach out to you as we do this. And I'll try to continue to repeat the question at a minute. We'll try to get you to wrap it up as best we can. And as Pastor Rick said, if you invoke the name of somebody else who's in this debate, we will allow that person to respond briefly as well.
Does that include me?
That does not include you, Father. It doesn't. All right, with that, let's get started. Given what Congress has already done, and given the current size of the national debt and the trillions of dollars that we continue to spend over these last couple of months as the coronavirus has taken hold of this country, this question is not a comment on what has already been done. Thinking forward, as a member of Congress, you would be asked to make some very important decisions. There's a lot of debate. What should Congress do next? Given the current national debt and given what has already been done, what, as a member of Congress, do you believe, and what ideas would you bring forward that Congress should be doing next as we think about the future of this country, not only the distant future, but the immediate future? And with that, Dane Eagle, you're up first.
I had to unmute. I was chopping at the bit. I'm glad you called on me first. I think Congress in the United States has done enough. It's time to hold China accountable. And look, we've seen the stimulus package. We've seen things come through. I commend President Trump for his leadership in making sure that was passed through. What we've seen is a government taking. Government has asked everybody to shut down, and people have lost their livelihoods, their jobs, through no fault of their own. So therefore, they should be compensated by their government. But that time has passed. We're starting to reopen. People need to get back on their feet. Then it's up to the states to decide. And I think Governor DeSantis has done a phenomenal job. Now it's time to hold China accountable so that we could backfill what we've already paid, and therefore also make sure that those who are in need are able to get any kind of compensation they need from who is directly at fault, not the United States government, but the Chinese government. For one, not disclosing what we're dealing with this issue, for hiding their data, for not concealing what we can be doing to protect ourselves, and for being the root of the cause. The wet markets need to be shut down. There's no question about it. It's time to hold China accountable once and for all. I'm committed to doing so. I look forward to seeing what our great president's going to do to hold them accountable. You can count on me to support him.
Dan Severson, what, if anything, should Congress do next as we contemplate the future of this country?
You know, the last stimulus bill that was passed, only about half of that has actually been disseminated, and we're still working on getting the rest of that out to needy businesses. I think we saw that with Nancy Pelosi's commitment to funding all of her special interests with this last stimulus bill. I think that's a dead-on arrival. I think Mitch McConnell is absolutely right in this process. I also believe that our national debt is a national security issue. When we owe so much to another nation that really holds our debt, we become debtors and we become enslaved to that particular. So I agree with holding China accountable in that process. And I believe that right now it gives us a time of reflection to say, what businesses do we need to pull back from overseas, bring them back here, and have our government give some incentives to those businesses that would relocate back here in particular states that would be hospitable to that. And I think that's where the states come in to create an atmosphere where it really welcomes those businesses back with particular incentives. I'm also a big believer in a balanced budget amendment. And I believe that I signed on to that. And I think that's something we need to do as a national security issue.
Byron Donald, what, if anything, should be the next focus for this U.S. Congress as we contemplate the future, both in the near future and in the distant future in this country?
Well, listen, this is a great question, and it's a timely one. The first thing is with respect to more stimulus packages or relief packages, Congress doesn't need to do anything else. It is clear that government is responsible for shuttering businesses and forcing residents and citizens to stay at home. But now it's the time to actually reopen, like we're doing here in Florida. People need to get back to work. They need to get back to their lives. But past that, a couple of things we definitely need to do is we need to start taking a hard look at the regulatory state. President Trump has already led the charge on that in his first 3.5 years in office. But we have to start stripping major regulations away from our business sector so they have more room and opportunity to compete here in the United States as opposed to going over to China. The last thing we have to remember is that the Chinese are not our friends. They are our enemy. The Chinese have a 100-year plan where they want to be the singular power in the world, and they move on that plan every single year. I would hope that Democrats would get off of the current political barrage with the president and get focused on making sure that we hold the Chinese accountable. But number two, we do everything we can to make sure that American business and citizens have every opportunity to succeed in the new world to come.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Battye, as a member of Congress, how would you think about the future decisions that august body should make?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we are still in recovery mode, so it's absolutely correct to continue to provide legislation that's going to help everyday Americans in the situation that they are in. We are not back working at full tilt in our economy. People are starting to lose their houses. We have difficulties with our ability to exercise our democratic right of voting. We need to make decisions to protect people right here and now. Also, we need to look in the 117th Congress on how we're going to rebuild our economy. Even in 2003, SARS in Taiwan, even after a 2-week shutdown, had a major long-term economic ramification on their country. The only way for us to really go back and get our economy back going is through fiscal policy. And that means massive investment from the government to get sectors of the economy that have been negatively affected by the shutdown going again. So rebuilding our roads, rebuilding our infrastructure, and making people get back to work. The other thing that we need to consider is that China is not our enemy. That is pure escaping. Like, we actually have people over there that are our friends, and everybody who wants to put the blame on China doesn't truly understand our global economy, trade, or foreign policy.
Thank you, Ms. Battye. Mr. Holden, as a member of Congress, what decisions would you make, if any, in regards to kind of the next package, given what we've already seen with the growth of the national debt?
Thank you. You know, it's interesting. Republicans only talk about the deficit when there's a Democrat in the White House. So I guess my colleagues here are anticipating, as I am, the incoming Biden administration. There's a lot of work to be done in Congress. We've got to make sure that working families get income support throughout what is going to be a very long process of dealing with the pandemic. Unfortunately, because of the premature reopenings, we are going to have a second wave, and I pray it is not as catastrophic as being projected. We have to make sure that universal health care is available to every American. We have to make sure that working Americans have paid sick leave. We need to have paid maternity leave. There's a lot of work to be done. We also need to undo the corporate tax cuts in the 2017 tax giveaway that was passed by the Congress and signed into law by President Trump. There's a lot of work to do, and we also need to halt the rollback of environmental protections.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. And finally, last but certainly not least, Ms. McLaughlin, Christy, as a member of Congress, what decisions would you make going forward?
Thank you so much. Well, I don't know what David was listening to, but I think I speak for all of my Republican candidates when we eagerly anticipate 4 more years with President Trump. We are very excited for that. Now, when it comes to China, China is an aggressor, and they are run by the Communist Party, so they are indeed our enemy. Now, we look towards what China did in regards to this COVID-19 pandemic. They hid the fact that they were not only not transparent, but they actually hid the fact that there was human-to-human transmission. They hoarded PPE. And while they stopped travel within the country from Wuhan to outside within China, they still allowed travel from China to outside of the country globally. So they encouraged the spread through not only negligent, but deliberate actions. So China is indeed an aggressor. But the problem is, when I worked in DC on Capitol Hill, my experience was there's a lot of good ideas, but you need a strong candidate who is going to actually enforce a plan. And how are we going to hold China accountable? And here's my plan. We have $1.3 trillion in debt owed to China. That needs to be forgiven at minimum, because that will be solving the pain and suffering of American people.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Father Orsi?
Okay. Wowee. All right. Before I begin my question, I just want to tell all of you how much I enjoyed you last time, and I think I'm enjoying you even more this time. People I spoke to said to me, not only did we get different points of view, but we were informed as to the issues. And believe it or not, a lot of people are not even aware of what the issues are. So you're bringing them to light. This is a very, very fine educational moment for a lot of people. Okay, now I have a question regarding the student debt. Okay, it's now estimated to be, I think, $1.5 trillion. That's what I'm told. Now, maybe we can get that from the Chinese. If we find them, we get the 1.5 trillion, and that'll take care of the debt. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen right away, as far as I can see. So I want to know, what's your position on repayment of $1.5 trillion student debt? Okay, what do we say? We start with my friend. Hey, how about Dan Severson?
Thank you, Father Orsi. That's a great question, and you can see in the faces of the students that is a critical question. We had a debate the other night with some of those students, and it was very interesting to hear their perspective. But the last thing we need to do is forgive that student debt, because that basically says for those students and those families that have saved up and made sacrifice to get the monies together to get that education, that all their effort was for naught. So I think one of the things we need to do is move towards privatization of those college funds, of resources. And then as we go through this process, we should be mitigating some of the interest on those debts. I believe that when it went to a government sector under Obama, that there was some real issues with a constant hit in terms of that interest rate, and they aren't able to negotiate that. They can negotiate that in the private sector. And one of the other things we need to do is bring it to the private sector, and making those a private loan is the value of that education is subject to the person that's making the loan or the institution that's making that loan. So if it's a degree that it is a very needy area for that occupation, they can be very flexible on the rates and how they give that loan, and it creates incentives for the students to go into an area that is really in need of their expertise or in need of that profession. So I think there's a lot of things we can do to mitigate that. The last thing we want to do is forgive that student loan.
Okay. Well, what about Dr. Banier? Would you like to speak to the problem of the student debt?
All right, I got 90 seconds.
$1.5 trillion, that's a lot of money.
So here's my perspective on this, is that I'm very worried about this. There are plenty of experts who are speculating that this is the next big crisis economically for us. Of course, this was before the COVID crisis that we're looking at, but that students bearing this debt ultimately have lower lifetime earning potential. They don't buy homes. This is a really bad macroeconomic policy from the very start. So what I would like to see is a couple of things. First and foremost, all students who had private school loans and predatory debt that didn't complete it, a lot of whom were veterans, by the way, should absolutely be available to get amnesty for those debts. I think also that we should start a national service program to help people more specifically be able to pay down debt to a reasonable amount. I think that privatization is the wrong way forward. It has never been a good solution for the American people when it comes to a public good like education. And so I would be a big proponent of making sure that we take this burden off of students and continue to find ways to lower the cost of higher education and remove predatory lending.
Okay. Mr. Donald, what's your solution to this huge debt that students owe?
Father Orsi, I'm going to go back one brief moment about China. It was said in the last question that if you don't understand China's role in the global economy, that you're not familiar with global economics.
Okay, wait. Are we allowed to do this now? This is a rebuttal, Byron, isn't it?
Oh, no, I'm just making a comment. I'm not rebutting.
All right. What do you think, Dr. Bob? We'll let him run with it?
Yeah.
All right.
Let him run.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm reclaim. Can I reclaim? All I want to do is reclaim my time, though. I will.
You owe me, Byron.
All right, thank you. No, thank you. I think it's important to note that China has developed developing nation status with the World Trade Organization, something the United States does not have, something that the Chinese government needs to give back and should have given back more than 30 years ago. But let's put China to a side. Student loan debt is critical. One of the things we cannot do is have a position where we're just going to start forgiving loans in the United States. The biggest issue we've had around student loan debt has been essentially the inertia in our educational system that makes children go to college to be quote unquote successful. There needs to be multiple ways to be successful in America, not just going to college. And one of the things we should do as a government is actually begin to create some sort of economic priority with respect to college majors about what people are going to take on student debt. I've taken on student debt. I pay it every day, and I'm glad that I do because it helped me be successful in America.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Okay, we gave him some extra time because he and Father Orsi were having a conversation, but we do need to stick to our 1 minute responses if we can. I'll give you a couple of seconds if you're at 1 minute, but then I'm going to start being a little bit more heavy-handed. Father Orsi, you're up.
Mr. Holden, what would you do regarding your position on the student debt?
Thank you. I agree with my friend Dan Severson that any solution to the debt problem has to take into account individual students and families that have worked hard and sacrificed. But having said that, I think that students should not be a profit center, and most student loans are federal loans. So I would zero out that interest rate and I would rebate interest, and that would take a huge burden off students. But the other piece of it is that, when I hear older voters, older people talk about working their way through college, well, you know what? In the 60s, you could do that because we made massive public investments in higher education. And those investments created tremendous wealth and tremendous prosperity in this country. And I also agree with my friend Byron that we need to give students multiple paths forward. College is not the choice that everybody wants to make. We have failed and fallen down on trade school and career training for jobs that are critically important and have been left unfilled.
Okay, Mr. Eagle, your position on repayment of student debt.
Thanks for the time. And I do want to talk about China too, since Byron got to. I got to spend some time in Taiwan this summer, and Taiwan is a freedom-loving, island that is under the shadow of communist China. We had to flee because of the protests in Hong Kong. If China doesn't support freedom in Hong Kong and Taiwan, then we cannot support China. Back to student debt, let's make China pay. But seriously, they should. But look, the real issue is we cannot forgive those loans. I am the reluctant new recipient of student loans through marriage. God love my wife, she's a chiropractor, but I cannot ask my neighbors to pay off those loans. It's our job to get up, go to work in the morning, continue to pay those down. But yes, we can look to reform by privatization, by university reform as well. Not everybody needs to go get that 4-year degree and take on all that student debt and come out on the other side without a job to be able to pay for it. That's why we need to look to vocational learning and other ways to make sure that people are connected with the job on the other end and they're not taking on all this debt that they cannot pay and therefore looking to government to forgive it. We cannot look to that. We need to look to our own means.
Okay, well, Ms. McLaughlin, do you want to say anything more about China? Oh, go ahead. No, student debt.
I think I said what I needed to say about China, so I will focus on student debt, which the real issue is that universities and colleges are indoctrination institutions. I personally was the victim of discrimination because of my political beliefs as a conservative in my first year of law school. Now, the issue is that it has a very low return on investment. Going into college is not what it used to be. There's a low return on investment now, but it's such a high price, particularly when there's a political ploy going around for giving student debt, in which it's really only going to provide more power for the universities to handpick students who are indoctrinated or are impressionable to their political ideals, and then have them be successful in the career force. We need a free market when it comes to colleges and universities. That will create accountability and ensure that prices become more competitive and more consistent with what the students need, whether it's actually going to college or whether they can make the decision to go into a vocation. It's taking the power away, the monopoly out of the colleges and universities.
Okay, thank you. We got everybody, right? Okay, Dr. Bob, you're up.
Thank you. Question number 3. Given what we've seen in the media with group gatherings and other kinds of things, religious services, barbers being handcuffed, businesses being shut down, do you have any constitutional concerns regarding this tension between public health and the public economy, the private economy? We've seen governors put people in jail. We've seen discussions about public health and the private economy. What, if any, constitutional concerns do you have, and what is the remedy to balance this situation? And with that, we'll start with Ms. Battye.
I thank you. I really do not see a lot of issues with this particular constitutional perspective. I really think that it's important to prioritize health and life here, just like you cannot run into a theater and yell fire, and call it free speech. You do not have the right to infect people during a pandemic. The thing that's so interesting right now is that there used to be a trust in the government, and there used to be a community spirit that we had that understood that we are doing these things to protect our families and our communities. This is less for me about a constitutional issue related to freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and all of that kind of stuff, than it is a crisis of community in our country where we no longer value the lives of other people in the same way. And that for me is a big issue. The only small thing that I see when it comes to arresting folks is the types of people that are arresting. Like, for instance, in New York, where they're arresting more people of color for violating the stay-at-home orders.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Donalds, do you see any constitutional concerns regarding religious services, group gatherings, barbershops, salons, and those kinds of things?
Listen, this is a great question. There are major issues and major constitutional issues without question. I think when you're talking about emergency powers that every governor and every state in the country has, that's when there's a clear and present danger. When it's something of dealing with, when you're dealing with an emergency like a hurricane or flooding or something like that, then yeah, there's a clear and present danger associated with that. There was a time back in late February, early March, there was a clear and present danger with coronavirus. But now that we've looked at the data, what we've gone is from that standard to clear and present fear. And that's not the way you govern. I do think that there's a limit to orders, emergency orders of shutting down businesses, of stopping religious services, of going to the barbershop. I think if you look at Georgia, you look at Florida, Governors Kemp and DeSantis, they've walked that line about as thinly as you can, respecting civil liberties. But we have many states in the country which are now being sued because of their overreach in their actions. It's a major constitutional crisis, I believe. And I think you always have to side on the liberty of the people over the fear of potential health risks going on.
Thank you, sir. Ms. McLaughlin, do you have any questions or concerns about the constitutional rights and the balance of public health and the private economy?
I absolutely do. In fact, I have consistently from the very beginning voiced my concerns in the quarantine orders and the forced isolation, because it is an infringement on our rights to assemble, our rights to religion, and our rights to move about the country. We are individuals. We give the power to the government through our consent, not the other way around. And that has been lost through this pandemic. Now, addressing the pandemic and the fear, we know now, particularly after the beginning of March, we know that we have a less than 1% death rate, especially here in Florida. This is not a proportional reaction. We have caused so much more harm than good through our reaction to the virus. And we have infringed on so many constitutional rights that we have set a precedent that anytime there's any kind of fear, for whatever reason, even if it's actually not at all proportional to react, it's going to set the precedent that we allow a government to infringe on our constitutional rights.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin.
Infringement on religion.
I appreciate that very much. Mr. Holden, do you have any thoughts or questions or concerns about the constitutional rights of the individual citizens in balancing public health with the private economy?
I've got a lot of thoughts on it. Inconvenience is not oppression. I understand the frustration that people feel at not being able to go about their normal activities, not being able to observe their faith in the way that they are traditionally and moved to do. But we have to put public health first. Less than 1% death rate would be 30 million dead Americans. We're already at 100,000. And I think we have to step back, understand that we have prematurely reopened. Look at the spikes in Georgia and Florida. We don't have good numbers because those numbers are being suppressed and manipulated in certain states. We are not doing adequate testing. We are not doing adequate contact tracing, and we're not doing an adequate job of isolating those risks. We have to put the public's health first. We will reopen. Of course, we will rebuild our economy, but we have to make sure every American is safe. And it's turned into a political football rather than a public health issue, which is what it should be.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Severson, thoughts on possible constitutional issues as we balance the private economy and public health?
Yeah, thank you. A great question. And it really does infringe upon the Ninth Amendment as interpreted by the Supreme Court, right to privacy and right to move about freely. And I understand the initial intention was to make sure that all of the stuff that had been put out on this coronavirus was very impactful. But now we're seeing the actual results and the actual data-based facts, and what we're seeing is far less than what they had originally projected. So the other beautiful thing about this whole process is that it gives each of the states the ability to respond independently. And President Trump did the right thing when he gave that authority over to the governors to set up their own pattern and then gave them a general pattern to go after. But you see from Michigan, and you see the patriots that are rising up in Michigan, where they're going to the Capitol and demanding their rights back. And really, the remedy to this process is the ballot box, because these people are going to remember their liberties and their rights being stripped from them because one individual thought that this was in their best interest. Power remains with the people.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Severson. I appreciate that. And finally, Dane Eagle, questions and thoughts about the constitutional issues as we balance the private economy with the issues of public health.
I have grave concerns. The inconvenience is absolutely oppression. Anytime that our government is inconveniencing us, we live in a free country, they're infringing on those freedoms, no question about it. Now, I commend President Trump. What he issued was guidelines for the states, and the governor, through the 10th Amendment, decided what was best for our state. We were one of the last states to close and one of the first states to open. And even through that, he's continued to issue guidelines. I haven't seen arrests. If there have been, they've usually been overturned. And if I'm mistaken on that, I'd love to see that data. But this isn't a time to go out and arrest people for trying to make a livelihood and try to put food on their table. And that's not what we've seen here in Florida. So I commend our governor for making that leadership and making those charges. This is about personal responsibility. About getting government out of the way. If you even look to the data before the governor issued the shutdown, people were already sheltering in place. Look at cell phone data, you look at traffic patterns. People know what is best for them. If you give them guidelines, as the president and our governor has done, people will do so to make sure that themselves and their families are safe, and then get out there and operate accordingly. But I commend our governor and president for finding that fine line.
Thank you, sir. Father Orsi, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about immigration. Okay, we have, well, according to who you listen to, between 12 million and 20 million illegal immigrants in the country. DACA has just expired. Okay, do you have any program as to what we should do with these people? Some of them who have been here since they're children. So, what do you have to say about that, Mr. Eagle?
No amnesty. People need to get in line as anyone else who tried to come to this country has had to do. I welcomed my brother-in-law here, and he went through the process. It took too long, quite frankly, and cost him a lot of money, but he did what was required by the law. So there is immigration reform that's necessary. 100%, we need to rebuild the wall and stop allowing people to come here illegally. There needs to be a process put in place. Can that process be more efficient? Probably, but we need to address that after we stop the illegal immigration problem. We are a nation of laws, and anytime that we allow someone to come here illegally, we spit in the face of those who try to come here legally and our ancestors who did so as well. If we want to abide by the laws and continue to be a great nation, let's welcome immigrants who can come here and produce in our economy and do great things, but we need to do it the right way by abiding by the law. Just as we did in Florida by banning sanctuary cities and passing E-Verify under my tenure as majority leader, I will continue to push those issues in Congress and start by building the wall.
Okay, Mr. Holden, what would you have as a solution to the problem with illegal immigrants, 12 million to 20 million? What would you do?
Well, first I will say there are no illegal human beings. These are undocumented immigrants in my view. And what we have to do is what we did so successfully in 1986, which was to create a bipartisan, broad-based immigration reform that provided a path to citizenship, signed into law by Republican President Ronald Reagan. We are not going to kick 12 million people out of this country. Most of them, the vast majority, are law-abiding, hardworking folks who pay billions and billions and billions of taxes into our system, who do a tremendous amount of the work that is now all of a sudden, in light of the pandemic, deemed essential. We are indeed a country of laws, and we have strong laws and strong enforcement, but we need a resolution that gives people hope. We need to give the DACA recipients and TPS recipients a path to citizenship, and it can't take 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McLaughlin, what would you do regarding the problem with illegal immigrants in the country?
Well, this is a very personal matter to me. My family is Cuban, and they immigrated legally here to the United States in 1961. Now, we are a country built on laws, but we're also a country that's built on our national security. And that's the issue that we're facing right here today. Now, I'm going to make the comparison that we have approximately 4 million illegal immigrants entering the United States annually. And 55% are from Mexico. And 80 to 90% of drugs that enter the United States are associated with illegal immigration from Mexico. That is a matter of national security. We have human trafficking, drug trafficking, and so many crimes being committed other than the initial crime of illegally entering our nation. It's for our safety that we needed to have built the wall yesterday. But an additional plan I have is to end birthright citizenship. It's just another incentive to walk all over our laws, use and abuse our American system, and continue on this path of allowing illegal immigrants to take advantage of the American citizen and harm.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Thank you very much.
Dr. Banier, your solution to the problem with illegal immigration.
So no es illegal. There is no such thing as illegal immigration in this country. People who come here on a variety of circumstances, such as a student visa or a tourist visa, and overstay them, makes up the vast majority of the numbers around, what is called "quote unquote" illegal immigration. Furthermore, even if you have documentation that's not the way it's supposed to be, it's a civil infraction and a misdemeanor, much in the same way that your first offense at a DUI is. And so should we be deporting people based on that circumstance? I don't think that that's necessary. I also think it's really important and kind of interesting to think about how historically it was quite easy to come into the United States. And I think the wet foot, dry foot way that Cuban people got here, the policies around that allowed them to come here and then have their children become citizens through birthright citizenship was really an amazing thing. And those are the types of policies with humanistic base that we need to institute and find a pathway to citizenship for everyone in the United States.
Mr. Donalds, your solution to the problem of illegal immigrants in the country.
Well, first and foremost, if you overstay your visa in any country, let alone the United States, and you don't return to the country you immigrated from, that is illegal immigration. That is the sheer definition of it. And no matter what kind of words, no other kind of way you try to coax it, that's the fact of the matter. So I agree, visa overstays are the number one issue with respect to immigration, but we have to enforce that. You signed a document to come to the United States for a period of time. And on that document, you're supposed to return to your country of origin. If you don't go back, we're completely within our rights as a nation to deport you the same way that the nations of Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Colombia, El Salvador would deport me if I overstayed my visa, if I immigrated to one of those countries. But more than that, we have to build the wall because in the 1986 immigration bill that was signed by President Reagan, there was 500 miles plus of fencing in that bill. That was a part of that deal. The Democrats would never agree to funding it. In 2006, there was double layer fencing, and part of that deal, the Democrats would never agree to fund it. So we have to take this seriously. We have to build the wall, and yes, we have to deport people. It's the
Thank you,
only
Mr.
way.
Donalds. Thank you very much.
Mr. Severson, your solution to the problem of illegal immigration.
And I just want to add on to that. In 1986, President Reagan signed into that bill amnesty. And there were still a large number of immigrants who failed to come forward, illegal immigrants who failed to come forward to take advantage of that amnesty. Here we are, 25 years later, and we have the same deal again. Everybody remembers those train loads of illegal immigrants coming across into Mexico and then coming up to our border and flooding in. That was not passive. That was an invasion. That is why we need a wall on the southern border. We need to end chain migration, birthright citizenship, and the visa lottery. Those are really infringements upon our citizenry. And we are a country of the rule of law. And the individuals who are our legislators that are in Congress who refuse to abide by the rule of law should not be in their position as Congress people. In other words, those who are supplying and or condoning sanctuary cities to the states or sanctuary states. So those are some real issues that we need to address. I will address that when I go to Congress to ensure that only the people that are citizens have citizens' rights.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we got really covered. Let's go back to Dr. Bob.
Thank you, candidates. This question is about education. I'm sure many of you have become homeschooling parents all of a sudden. or perhaps if not you, we have homeschooling grandparents or a combination of the two. As the debate rages, and there really is no understanding of what the future holds as we open school back up in August or September, that's not the focus of this question. The focus of this question is, particularly in K-12, what do you see as the evolution of the future of education? Because it's going to change forever given this pandemic. What do you see? How do we improve education for our children at the K through 12 level? And what do you see as the future of education at those levels? We'll start with you, Mr. Severson.
I think the smooth integration from K-12, from actually high school into the vocational sector, and this is where we kind of get back to the other issue of higher education, an expansion of those vocational institutions sponsored in the communities to get them directly into those vocations, apprenticeships, those type of things in which the individual gets to explore many different careers before they actually commit to something and commit to a huge amount of student debt that goes into the college situation. But we homeschooled for a couple of years. We were in Christian schools a couple of years. We've been the gamut. And I'll tell you, the educational student institution that we have today is sorely wanting, instead of being a programming towards the socialist institutions and not giving the civics that our students need, we need to gear those individuals towards a citizenry that is going to be pro-America.
Mr. Holden, your thoughts on the future of K-12 education and its best future?
Well, we know it's going to change. When we come out of the other side of this pandemic, we're entering a new age when we're going to face these public health challenges more than once. I think we have done a poor job for our families and for our children over the last 40 years in defunding public education nationally and at the state level. You see it here in Florida, where massive sums of public money have been transferred to for-profit charter schools who don't meet the same standards as public schools. I think we need to reinvigorate our public school system. We need to pay teachers as the professionals and the leaders of the future that they are. We need to give students tremendous choice in how they learn and what they learn as far as their future careers. But we have to remember that public schools are critical connectivity in our nation. This is where citizens are formed. We need to reinvigorate and reinvest in those public school classrooms and in the professional educators that teach our children.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Mr. Eagle, your thoughts on the future of K-12 education?
Well, thanks for the question. As a congressman, my hope would be that I don't have a lot of say in what happens in education, because I don't believe it's a federal issue, and I'll be pushing to abolish the United States Department of Education. It will be a states' rights issue, and the rest of the states, the 49 others, can look to Florida to what we've done. Florida has done a phenomenal job in school choice, and because of that, we've been able to prepare for this pandemic. We've got virtual school, we've got online learning, we've got homeschooling. We promote parent choice in that. So a lot of these parents that are stuck at home and probably don't know what they're doing at least have a system and a format that we can look to at the state level through virtual learning that they can utilize. When it comes time to start back up school in August, they can decide for themselves what's right for their family, where they should continue to virtually learn or homeschool, or if they should send them back to school, and we should have a safe and healthy environment for them to be able to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Eagle. Ms. McLaughlin, your thoughts on the future of K-12 education?
Well, in Congress, I should start by saying that since I am a certified teacher and I've spent time teaching in a first grade and a fourth grade classroom, I have that personal experience to push in the right direction of what the students need. And the best interest of the student is what needs to be in the forefront. We do need to take away the federal control of our education system. As a teacher, I know that the student needs individual care, and the local control and the state control of the education system is what really makes a student prosper. Now, we know that every student has a certain cost when they go to a school, in which the government funds that school that they are meant to go to. My proposal is that we need to give more control to the parents to have an individualized program for the students. And that cost that they send to the school needs to go directly to the student so they can have their own curriculum, including vocation. We are going towards a future where different needs, rather than the basic K through 12 standard, are necessary. And that needs to go back to control of the parents. And I commend Governor DeSantis on his work with the Florida's Excellent Student Test.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Mr. Donalds, your thoughts on the future of K-12 education?
Listen, my time in the legislature the last 4 years, I've been a champion on education reform and really parental choice. And the future is really putting the purchasing power of a child's education directly into the hands of a parent so that they can make the decision about where their child is going to go to school. And through that process, through actually adopting something we do in virtually every other sector of our economy, when people are actually making choices for themselves, they get the best possible product at the lowest possible cost. That's only to the benefit of our students. It brings more competition to the system, and that's exactly where we need to go. Being in Congress, one of the committees I would hope to serve on is the Education Committee, like I served on in the Florida House, and I will be working to basically unwind the Department of Education. You can give block grant Title I funding directly to the states, and the states can disperse that amongst the schools that need it, like the states do today. But at the end of it all, we got to put purchasing power into the hands of all parents, whether they are rich, whether they're poor, they're middle income, whether they're white, they're Black, or Hispanic, because parents are the ones who truly are looking out for the best interest of their children over any bureaucracy.
Thank you, Mr. Donalds. And finally, Ms. Battye, your thoughts on the future of K-12 education?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be presenting my perspective here as the only person on the panel here who is 100% doing the virtual school with their 2 children. Also, I'm also the only teacher who has taught education, pre-K education during a pandemic before, during my 3 years in Taiwan as a kindergarten teacher, as well as a higher education teacher and somebody who has researched extensively education and workforce and alignment throughout this region. What I really think that we need to do is not look to privatize the system. I love the idea that parents are responsible, but all of us who have been educators, we know that that's not necessarily the case. The reason that we need a robust public education system is because parents are not necessarily always there for students, but schools are. And we need to make sure that we're educating people to take care of themselves. So we need to continue to have that correlation and the relationship between the local, the state, and the national level to aggregate those funds to ensure that we have strong schools and take the necessary health and safety precautions to keep students safe post-pandemic, as well as compensate teachers who are doing the heavy work.
Thank you very much, Ms. Battye. Father Orsi, over to you.
Well, let's ask our candidates if they could do an evaluation of outgoing Congressman Rooney. Okay, first his greatest accomplishment, and then his greatest mistake. Okay, Ms. Battye, Dr. Banier, what do you have to say?
You know, Representative Rooney has been absent so many times, it's hard to know what his greatest accomplishment was because he missed so many of the votes. I know that he's been somebody who has championed bringing dollars to the region as far as environmental issues. And that gives him, you know, a good solid C+ when it comes to the environment. And for that, we're thankful. But I ultimately think that that's greenwashing when it comes to the truth and reality of a man who made his money cementing over our environment and drilling oil wells. I actually begun this campaign to run against Francis Rooney because of his greenwashing on the environment and because of his high rate of absenteeism. I just do not think that that is what the people of Southwest Florida deserve in their congressional representative.
Okay, Mr. Eagle, what would you say is his greatest accomplishment and greatest mistake of outgoing Congressman Francis Rooney?
Well, it goes to show you how to touch the Democratic Party is when they give our congressman who's done more for water quality than any in the past a C+. He deserves an A+ for everything he's done for the environment. We at the state level have issued $1.3 billion towards environmental funding these past 2 years, whereas the federal government's done, I think, close to $500,000, which is more they've ever done. They've got more to do with Congressman Rooney, working with Senator Rubio and Senator Scott, got that work done. I think his greatest failure, and he'll readily talk about it, was his signaling that he may be willing to impeach Donald Trump. And he later came forward and said, absolutely, there's no way that he could do so after reviewing the evidence. So he did redeem himself in that way. But there's no question about it that the impeachment process was a witch hunt by the Democratic Party. And I do fault Francis Rooney for even signaling that they were onto anything whatsoever there. But I do commend him for coming back to the table and not supporting the witch hunt whatsoever.
Mr. Severson, his greatest accomplishment and greatest mistake outgoing Congressman Francis Rooney?
I think he has done a lot for the environment, for the funding, for our clean waters. That's a real strong plus. I think one of his biggest mistakes was the carbon tax, as well as the signaling that he would be in favor of the impeaching our president. But the carbon tax was definitely outside the realm of this district, a conservative district that really looks at that whole process as a boondoggle. Now, the thing we need to take a look at here is he's the third in line that has been a billionaire that has bought this seat, coming in with special interests and coming in with a lot of money and really not responsive to the public. And you see there's a couple here that have that situation where they're running this time again, who don't really care about what the public is asking. They're just going to buy the seat by just buying a lot of ads. That's a problem that this district needs to resolve, and hopefully we'll overcome this time and look at the experience that the candidates have, of which I do have the most, both in the legislature and in the military. And national security is one of those issues that is near and dear to my heart. That's what I will do when I'm in Congress.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Holden, what do you have to say about Francis Rooney's biggest accomplishment or biggest mistake?
I think Congressman Rooney's biggest accomplishments were the movement he made forward on environmental issues. I think his foresight on the carbon tax is excellent, and he also moved forward on gun safety. His biggest failure, I think, was his refusal to debate me in 2018. All kidding aside, I think that his lack of responsiveness once he decided not to run, his inability to show up for critical votes, that's a failure that we simply, the people of Southwest Florida don't deserve that. But I also think that, he is a man of integrity and a man of deep thought, and his willingness to look at the rule of law, the issues around what has been going on with the Trump administration, that took a lot of courage, and I commend him for that.
Okay, Ms. McLaughlin, Francis Rooney's greatest accomplishment and biggest mistake.
I think we can all agree that his greatest accomplishment was the work for water quality. He did tremendous work in ensuring that the state of Florida received the proper funding we needed when it came to the blue-green algae and the red tide issue. But that said, I think the biggest issue was not fulfilling the promise of conservatism. This was an issue that arose when he voted in favor of the Raise the Wage Act, when he stated that he needed more information on whether or not to impeach President Trump when there was clear evidence that it was a complete farce, and also when it came to actual funding for the wall. My issue is, as a lifelong Southwest Florida resident, I have endured many representatives who have made so many false promises. This is a time where we need a candidate who is transparent and sincere. We need to vote on the character and the merits. And we need to vote in a true conservative who will actually fulfill the promises without the influence of special interests and lobbyists, which I pledged I would never accept on the first week of my campaign.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin.
And did we get a chance to hear from Mr. Donald? Did we hear from you?
No, but I'm going to give you an answer.
I know you will. Oh, that's on my time.
well, listen, I think it's without question that Congressman Rooney's biggest accomplishment has been his work on water quality in Southwest Florida. And if the voters choose me to replace him in Congress, I'm going to continue that work. Our water is critical here in Southwest Florida for our economy. And if you take a look at the Everglades waterway system, the reason why so much funding is necessary from the federal government and from the state government is because the federal government is the one that messed it up in the first place. And so there is a responsibility that we fixed it. The places where, in my opinion, he failed was not supporting the president during what was obviously a very politically motivated impeachment process. So supporting a $15 minimum wage, supporting a carbon tax, those are things that simply don't align with the values of the people of Southwest Florida. So that's why I'm in this race, to make sure that our next congressman is a conservative you can trust, and I know I'm that candidate.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Bob, back to you.
Pastor Rick, you want us to keep going along?
Sure,
I've got many more questions.
Yeah, let's ask a few more questions, please.
Okay, do you want to shorten the time frame, or do you want lightning round, or how do you want to keep doing what we're doing?
I'll leave that to your discretion.
Okay, I'd like to do a 30-second lightning round with everybody, and that is I want to revisit China. Some of you see them obviously as foe. Some of you see them as friend. The reality is they are the world's second largest economy. America is obviously the largest economy. Some of you have said hold them accountable. Some of you have said not to hold them accountable. In 30 seconds, Keith, 30 seconds post-pandemic, what should America's relationship be with China? And if we are to hold them accountable, how so? With that, Ms. McLaughlin, we will start with you.
Our relationship with China needs to be tough. And we need to support President Trump in being tough on China because we do need accountability. They need to pay up. They need to forgive the $1.3 trillion debt. And they are in a million-year marathon trying to overtake the United States. We need to have we need to eliminate foreign dependence and be an independent nation away from China.
Great. Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Mr. Donalds, your thoughts on China. 30 seconds.
Well, I mean, like I said, they have to get off developing nation status with the World Trade Organization. That's number one. Number two, we have to continue the work that the president has started with redoing our trade agreements with the Chinese. And number three, we have to begin to bring manufacturing back to the United States, which means we're going to have to take a look at our regulations here in America to make sure that we can manufacture and compete with them, not just on the other economic fronts, but on that one as well. I think that's why you hold them accountable.
Thank you, Mr. Donalds. Mr. Severson, your thoughts on future relations with China?
Well, we need to treat them as an adversary. They are not our friends. They are partners in trade in some areas. We need to be very protective of our 5G capabilities, and President Trump is doing the exact right thing to cut ties with Huawei there and ensure any of our allies who are using them are cut off. And so that in concert with a space force, which President Trump has had the vision to incorporate. And I think that is a huge venue in which China is working hard to dominate. And if they do, we're in big trouble. It's a national.
Thank you, Mr. Severson. Ms. Banier, your thoughts on future relations with China?
So I agree that they should not have developing nation status in any of the UN systems. I agree that we shouldn't let Huawei in because here's the thing, even though we have a strong relationship in a lot of ways with China, they are not necessarily to be trusted. Anybody who trusts data coming out of China is a fool. But that doesn't mean that we cannot have good relationships diplomatically. That doesn't mean that we can't have good relationships business-wise. It's just a matter of being smart about whom we're dealing with. And this also goes around foreign policy and the South China Seas and making sure that we have strong support for Taiwan.
Thank you, Ms. Banier. Mr. Eagle, your thoughts on future relations with China?
Well, for one, we need to continue to support President Trump on renegotiating the trade agreements. We need to stop borrowing money. We need to bring our manufacturing jobs back here once and for all. But let's take it a step further. If we really want to hold them accountable, put them on trial. Just as we did with Nazi Germany and the Nuremberg trials, we need to rely on our allies across the world, put China on trial, and let them and make them answer for the death and the destruction that we've seen across this entire world, and especially that we've seen here in the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Eagle. And finally, Mr. Holden, your thoughts on future relations with China?
The whole holding China accountable trope is a red herring. We need to treat China as the second superpower. We trade with them. We are also adversarial with them. But because of President Trump's abject and almost total failure as an international leader, we are allowing China to do the kind of work around the world, investing in countries, building relationships that we as America have been doing since World War II. We have to step back into international leadership. We have to assert the power of freedom over communism.
Thank you. Father Orsi, do you have another question?
Yeah. What is your opinion on how the president handled or is handling the corona crisis? Mr. Severson.
I think he's done a fabulous job. As a businessman, he understands the importance of the economy. He understands and loves America, and he loves the people of America, and he put that first in creating the safety net that gave us the medical response that we needed for that process. But now he understands that unless we have an economy that the American people can lean into, we don't have a country. And so he is doing his best to make sure that our country rebounds from this and continues in the prosperity that he initiated 3.5 years ago.
And Mr. Holden.
President Trump's leadership around the coronavirus is an abject and almost total failure. 100,000 dead Americans, 25% of the world's deaths. He has avoided taking responsibility at every turn. He is constitutionally incapable of being honest with himself or anyone else. He simply doesn't care about the suffering going on in this country. His efforts to point blame at other people and other nations is disastrous and, quite frankly, embarrassing to the country.
Mr. Eagle.
A+, and the reasons that we're seeing this from the other parties is exactly why we need someone strong in this district who's going to support our president. He's done a phenomenal job by putting people first in every decision that he's made. He's found that balance between safety and our economy, and he's continuing to put out those guidelines to make sure that people are safe, but that they're able to produce and put food on their table. I give him an A+, and I will be there with him in Congress to make sure that he continues to do a great job.
Dr. Banier, your opinion.
Biggest failure in history, period. There was no coordinated response. There was no respect for science. There was no respect for the individual people's lives. I think that anybody who says that Donald Trump put people first in this respect has not looked at the numbers. Like David said, almost 100,000 dead. We have the largest proportion of cases around the world. And it has everything to do with the lack of leadership, the lack of coordination, the lack of understanding of global supply chains, the lack of understanding of collaboration, and pure and simple greed. And I'm tired of it, and I will stand against it when I am a congressional representative for this district.
Mr. Donald, your opinion on how the president is handling the coronavirus crisis.
Listen, the president has done a great job handling the coronavirus crisis on a number of measures. Number one, he didn't use his position to become a draconian president the way Governor Whitmer has done in Michigan, the way Governor Cuomo has done in New York, or the way Governor Newsom has done in California. Number two is that he was there every step of the way with all governors, whether you were from a red state or a blue state, making sure you had all the equipment, ventilators, beds you could possibly need. It was not his decision to put coronavirus patients back into nursing homes. That was Governor Cuomo in New York. And so if you want to take a look at the deaths that we have in the United States, number one, if you're going to talk about the amount of cases we also have one of the largest populations in the world as a country. So you can't just say we have more numbers than other countries. And so that means we're not doing the job. The deaths in the United States, it's sad for the families that are having to go through this. But our coronavirus response has been exemplary, and that goes directly to the leadership that the president has brought to the country. And if you don't believe me, go ask Governor Cuomo and Newsom, because they said so themselves.
Hey, finally, Ms. McLaughlin, your opinion on the president's handling of the coronavirus crisis.
President Trump has been a rock star. The left has taken every opportunity to criticize President Trump when the reality is, early on, especially when so many people, including Dr. Fauci himself, were saying that the coronavirus was not something to be concerned about here in the United States, President Trump prevented travel from China early on, in which the left completely tried to destroy him on. That was a proactive measure that he took. We have a massive population of 330 million people in the United States. And per 100,000, we have a lower death rate than multiple countries, including Sweden. He has protected our personal liberties, balanced our health, and taken the proactive measures that we need in a strong leadership in both protecting the red and the blue states.
Okay, thank you.
Rick, we're bumping up on about an hour and 23 minutes. Are you ready for closing statements?
Sure, let's do closing statements. That'd be great.
Do you have an order you want to go in?
I do. How about if we start with Kristy?
Sure. My name is Kristin McLaughlin. I'm so proud to be running for the seat in Southwest Florida. This is an opportunity where we can truly have a representative for the people here. I know the issues because I've lived them every day of my life. We need a transparent and honest representative for Southwest Florida, someone who isn't going to use their money to buy a seat, someone who is going to be honest and sincere in their support for President Trump and being a conservative. I have shown that in my support for the Republican Party since I turned 18 years old. I have always been a supporter of the Republican Conservative Party, and I have consistently shown that after I became a certified teacher and became a lawyer. I'm a young Latina woman who is ready to expand the party and inspire young people to get more involved and look towards the future of our nation. If you have any questions, please visit christyforcongress.com. My phone number is 239-330-2475. You can reach me personally because I represent you.
All right. Thanks, Kristy. Let's go to David Holden. David?
Thank you so much for hosting this forum, and I am so happy to be here, and I commend all the candidates for those that are here and are willing to engage. We've had some difficult conversations. There's some strong differences in our perspective and what we will bring to the job. I believe that my experience and my training fits me to be the best representative for this district. If you're interested in seeing more about what I think and what I believe in, please go to holdenforflorida.com, and I'm looking forward to the next forum.
Thank you, David. And we're looking forward to it as well. And let's go now to Dane Eagle.
Thanks for the opportunity tonight to do this forum, and thank you for all the candidates for participating. My name is Dane Eagle. I'm the Republican Majority Leader in the Florida House, and I'm asking for your vote for Congressional District 19. I'm born and raised right here in Southwest Florida. I'm welcoming my son, who's going to be born here in Southwest Florida next month. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home and my community. It always has been and always will be. If you're looking for consistent conservative leadership, I've got the track record that's proven, and I've got the community behind me that I've lived and served with for a number of years. I got the opportunity to fly with President Trump on Air Force One last December, and it's clear that he continues to put people first in every decision that he makes. And I committed to him that we will deliver Florida and continue to make sure that Florida is red as we move forward through November. And I'm asking for your vote so that I can help him accomplish that. You can learn more at daneeagle.com, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Dane. Appreciate you joining us tonight. Let's turn now to Cindy. Cindy, for a closing statement.
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, it's been a fantastic forum. Thank you so much for hosting it again. You guys do a fantastic job of moderating, and I really appreciate it. So I'm Dr. Cindy Battye, candidate for Congress here in Southwest Florida. I'm a mom and small business owner, and I'm fighting for our water, our health, in our community. I think that I am the most committed and qualified candidate here. I have a doctorate degree. I'm in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at Florida Gulf Coast for the past 6 years. I've worked for 11 years with nonprofits across this region, helping them to serve our community better. I've also worked with people to bring out their voice, bringing forth the issues that are most important to our region. That has been the biggest failure of Francis Rooney and previous representatives to this region, and that is what is compelling me to be here. I am also somebody who has lived through a pandemic, lived abroad, and understands how other countries are doing it, and wants to see the United States restored to its position of global leadership that is significantly diminished during the Donald Trump administration. I am also the mother to a vulnerable child, and we are staying at home and have been and will do so until it is clear that the data shows us that there is no longer a risk for the coronavirus. That's why I was holding up this teddy bear to remind you of what you get when you have a baby that goes in an ambulance. And I'm fighting for healthcare because the financial toll that takes on families like mine and others across this country every single day with our broken healthcare system. So if you're like me and you are worried about what's going on in our country, you are worried about the people you care about, you are worried whether or not you are going to make it through this crisis, then you need somebody who is ready to go to Washington, D.C. and fight. I'm also a fighter. I'm a former professional boxer. And you want somebody that's going to go toe-to-toe with the bullies in Washington, D.C. and truly fight for the people, send Mama to Congress. You can see more about me.
Thank you, Ms. Battye. Thank you very much.
Florida.
All right. Thanks, Cindy. I'm glad to have you join us. Byron Donald. Byron, we'd love to hear from you.
It was this was a great event. I want to thank the other candidates who came on, and for the candidates who weren't here, I challenge you to show up, because you can't just run 30-second ads, because when the campaigns are over and you have to go to Washington, you got to be able to actually engage in our political issues. You have to be a spokesperson for conservatism in our area, and you have to be a leader. And you can't do that hiding behind your campaign consultants. Listen, my name's Byron Donald. I've lived here for 17 years. I've served the last floor in the Florida legislature. I got my start in politics in the Tea Party movement. I was a regular citizen up until the age of 30 years old. But I was concerned about the future of our country. I was concerned about our national debt. I was concerned about the Constitution slipping away here in America, and I got involved. And through that time, I've been a leader here politically, Southwest Florida, on the conservative movement. My time in the legislature, I've been the consistent conservative in the legislature. My record is impeccable and it's there for all to see. In Washington, I'll do what I've always done, which is be a leader in the conservative movement, which has helped to grow our party, to make sure we bring all voters into our party. And the last thing we got to do is make sure that we reelect our president, President Trump, because we have a country to rebuild and we have a nation to save. And so I'm Byron Donald. I'm running for Congress. I'm asking for your vote. Go to byrondonalds.com to find out more about me. Thanks for watching, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Byron. We'll turn now for final last words, I guess, from Dan Severson.
Thanks, Father Orsi. Appreciate the opportunity with the Florida Citizens Alliance tonight with this doing this forum. It's been awesome. A good opportunity for all the candidates, and I appreciate being able to have this debate. I'm Dan Severson. I'm the only candidate that served in both the minority and the majority. I didn't sit on the sidelines when I was in the minority. I became minority whip. The progressive agenda by leading the charge and sustaining the governor's veto. I did not and will not violate my oath to defend the Constitution. Some have done that. It's personal for me, and it was paid for the blood of some of my friends. As a strong Second Amendment supporter and as a freshman legislator, I co-sponsored and helped pass the concealed carry, even when the leadership thought it was too controversial. That's who I am, and that's how I will fight for you in Southwest Florida. I'm the only truly tested and proven leader. I will not have to have staff carry me through on day one. I'll be ready to do your bidding on day one. I'd be honored and humbled to have your support on August 18th. I'm asking you to go to my website, seversonforcongress.com. And we are a grassroots movement. We don't have a lot of big interests that are here in working on to support us. So we are about the grassroots and getting our word out and really making an impact with a strong voice for the Constitution and for our district in Washington, D.C. I have that experience. Please go to my website, seversonforcongress.com. May the Lord bless you, and thank you for this opportunity tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Dan, and thank all of you candidates and moderators. It was really a great conversation tonight. I really appreciate all of your contributions, and I'm convinced that because your forthrightness and your willingness to engage in this, our voters will know better how to vote. They'll understand you. They'll be able to make an informed decision, and that's what we're trying to do, and we appreciate you being a part of that. We want to remind everybody that the forum is recorded and it will be available on our flcaction.org website, and anybody can go there and watch it. It'll take us a day or two to get it up there, but it'll be at flcaction.org for everybody to see. Also on that website in the candidate forum section, there will be copies of the surveys that the candidates are asked to complete. There are blank copies there. You can go and look at them. And then once we have all of the forms completed, we will put those all together in a voter guide and post those there for everybody to look at. Also, I want to remind everybody that we do have one more forum. It's scheduled for Thursday, June 25th. It'll also be at 5 p.m., and we hope you'll join us for that. And we will be back here to help everybody be a well-informed voter. We also want to invite you to go to the Florida Citizens Alliance website. We work for K through 12 education solutions. We focus on here are solutions to help our children. And if you'd like to learn more about what we do, you can go to the website, goflca.com. That's goflca.com, and you'll find us more about us there. Or you can also visit our Florida Citizens Alliance Facebook page. We'd love to get acquainted with you and help you understand what we want to do to try to help our Florida children. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Thanks to the candidates and the moderators. These are enlightening and invigorating discussions. We look forward to having one more. But for now, we've got to say good night. May God bless America during these challenging days. May God bless you and keep you and your family. Good night.
Thank you.